Welcome to Reddit Aliens. What is a eerie town that you felt completely unwelcomed, and why? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy. Troyes, France. We were in an old medieval area which was incredible, but it was eerie because there were literally no other people there, and bizarre because there were sound systems pumping Britney Spears music into the streets. I felt like Shrek and Donkey walking into Duloc. Emmaville, NSW, old mining town, still has some life in it. Wandered into a weirdly empty and labyrinthine pub to find a bathroom, struggled to find my way out. There's a minerals museum there, pretty good. The further you go into the place, the weirder and weirder it gets. The town didn't get electricity till like 1958, and it shows. There's all these Black Panther things around too, all wired and off-putting and creepy. Apparently there's stories about a panther stalking the nearby bush. Panthers don't live in Australia. Overall, it was a really strange place, in a way that makes the pit of your stomach tense up and you want to run away. A buddy and I were taking a road trip a few states over. We left one evening and found ourselves early the next morning low on gas and looking for a place to fill up. We saw a sign that indicated there was a gas station at the next exit, so we took it and pulled into the eeriest little town in the Smoky Mountains. On the highway, it had been reasonably clear weather, but once we got down into a valley, there was dense fog everywhere. There were maybe 5 buildings in this whole town, and it looked totally abandoned. Even the gas station announced from the highway sign was closed. We pulled into the parking lot anyway because we needed a break, and got out to take a look around, and the eeriness just intensified. It was totally silent, not just quiet, but I literally could not hear a single sound other than our footsteps. We stood around for maybe 30 seconds, then looked at each other and silently decided to get the hell out of there. We didn't even say anything once we were in the car. Fortunately, we found a 24-hour truck stop a few more miles down the road, and the lights and activity were sufficient to snap us out of the spell that place had put us on, and we started talking about it. My buddy mentioned that he had sensed a lone, scary-looking guy just walking slowly past us some distance away, and barely visible through the fog, staring intently at us but not making a sound. I hadn't even noticed him. I guess I was looking in a different direction, but apparently he was giving off strong, "I will murder you, and no one will ever find the bodies" vibes. Hiking in the mountains of Romania, middle of nowhere, I find a paved road. It wasn't on any maps, no idea where it led or where it came from. No nearby villages or towns, just endless forests. And there's this immaculate 2-lane road cutting across the forest. I was legitimately creeped out. It was like one of those staircase in the woods creepypasta type things. Nitro, West Virginia. I pulled into a gas station to fill up my leaky tire. There were people hanging out at the gas station at 3 in the morning giving the tweaker stare. One asked to borrow my phone despite there being a working payphone. I jumped in the car with half a flat tire, went 10 miles down the road, and found a much less sketchy truck stop to fill the tire back up. Jaywick in East Anglia. It's the worst town in the UK, several years running. There's just nothing there. All the houses are dilapidated and their gardens ruined. For a place so close to the sea, it's so creepy you can't even hear the waves. It's not a scary place, just really shitty, and it just makes you uncomfortable. It's probably the only place in the UK you can buy a beachfront property for under £100,000, but I don't even think that price would be worth it. Beachfront? £100,000? I mean, how bad could it be? Might be worth it. My college roommate, who is one of my closest friends, grew up in a little spot of nothing. I think the town only still exists because it's the last stop off an interstate leading out of our state. Maybe 250 residents. This is in the deep south too. When he got married, his wedding was held in his hometown. I was his best man, so I spent the weekend there helping him get things ready. Never felt more unwanted in a place before. People knew my buddy, and he was pretty popular, but me? They wanted nothing to do with me. Even at the wedding and reception, only one person who I didn't know from before spoke to me. When I would try to talk to others, they would smile politely, then walk away without otherwise responding. Even the dang preacher. I was happy to be there for my buddy, but I was really happy to leave town when that mess was over. It was like something out of a horror movie. Pretty benign by the standards of this thread, but a buddy and I were on a road trip to Vegas, and we stopped in this little small town in Nevada. Unbeknownst to us, it was right next to a military base that was apparently focused on some pretty high-level research. My buddy's car was not exactly in great shape, and we broke down while stopped at a red light on a road adjacent to the base. I kid you not, within maybe 3 minutes, there were 5 unmarked SUVs around us. The guys that got out were very friendly but very businesslike. They quickly got our car moving again, wished us well, and told us pleasantly but quite firmly not to stop on that road again. So we used to live in West Virginia, and my mom has a story where she got lost and ended up in a deserted town with one street and old-style buildings, but there were modern cars parked along the streets. She said some of the doors were open, but there was nobody in sight. She got a weird feeling and just turned around. My dad also worked for a natural gas company while we lived there, and he said by far the strangest town he went to was, unsurprisingly, called Odd in southern West Virginia. In northern BC, there's a long stretch of highway with absolutely nothing but dense forest, and it's nicknamed Highway of Tears, in reference to an incredible amount of mostly First Nation women who've gone missing or have been found dead or murdered on the stretch of road. After visiting family, my husband, kid 5, and I were headed south on that road during this one long stretch with few cars around us. A white cop flashed its lights to get us to pull over. So we did, and once pulled over, he turned his brights on. As we waited for the cop, my partner and I were trying to guess what this was about. We were driving an insured car at the speed limit, sober with a valid license. So after a couple of minutes, we were getting slightly worried we had unknowingly done something. When the officer got close enough to actually see him, this dude was not a cop. His uniform looked like he had ordered it off Wish and looked off. If you had never seen a uniform or weren't from this country, I don't think you would know. We asked to see his badge, and he got visibly nervous, so he went back to get the badge from the car, and suddenly the brights switched off and the car roared past us. When we reported it, we learned we weren't the only ones stopped by a fake cop. Jeffrey City, Wyoming. Stopped in at the only establishment in the ghost town. Old-timer is sitting at the bar and turns around before even saying anything to me, tosses me something and I catch it. It was a 50 cal round from an M2 or something. He was like, "Don't drop it, it'll probably detonate." I was like, "Thanks for the heads up, dude." Drank a beer with him, though he was nice enough, cowboy. Lewiston, Maine. It's not the people, it's the town. There's just something about the place that stains your soul. Even driving through the place and not stopping makes you want to shower afterwards, but soap and water doesn't make you feel clean because it isn't dirt or pollution that is sticking to you. It's the darkness that is Lewiston. Forsyth, Georgia. A few buddies and I took a road trip down to Florida shortly after we all graduated years ago. Had a tire issue, stopped there to grab a new one. The guy in the tire place recommended we try the subway while we waited. Everyone kept insisting we try the subway, even the people at the place we went to eat. The people at the little grocery store thing when we were grabbing road snacks. It was creepy as hell. Maybe the guy who owned the tire store owned the subway, so just kind of cross-promotion. Could be. Years ago, I stopped in a little town called Brandywine in West Virginia. Walked into a bar, and right away everyone turned and glared at me. A couple of good old boys asked me if I was looking for trouble, and if I wasn't, then I should move on. I left the bar, and a sheriff car and 2 trucks followed me out of town. The dude in the sheriff car glared at me all the way out of town, lol. I thought I was going to get lynched. Paisley, Ontario, Canada. I was heading out there with friends for a camping-style music festival, and this is before any of our group had GPS or Google Maps on our cell phones. We ended up getting lost on some of the country roads as everything looked the same, just fields and dirt roads, and the names and numbers on the roads weren't well marked. We finally decided to stop at a farm and ask for directions. It was a very old-looking place, and as soon as we pulled into the drive, a whackload of Amish-style dressed men and women and children came out, surrounded the car. Legit. One guy even had a scythe. I rolled my window down and politely said we were lost and asked how to get to such and such address. One of the men got down low and leaned right into the window and goes, "There's no place like that around here. How about you all stay here with us? You should stay here." And then he grinned this big greasy grin that gave me chills. People were really gawking and closing in around the car at this point, and my friends started freaking out. I said something like, "Thanks, but we gotta go." Then put my stereo system on blast, which got the guy out of my window and made the folks around the car back the F up. I immediately rolled up my window, revved my engine, and peeled out of there as fast as I could. We found the address about 5 minutes later just down the road. Total Children of the Corn vibes, for sure. Pelzer, South Carolina. To say it's off is an understatement. It's got national infamy decades ago for being home to a pedophile Taoist cult that was stopped by the FBI. Their symbols still tag the rotting buildings, and despite having residents, nearly all businesses are essentially empty. People drive far to avoid being there, and something is just unnatural about the aura. No one from Pelzer is from Pelzer. They are from Anderson. I was moving cross-country and driving my own truck. I stopped at a Walmart in the middle of nowhere in Arkansas to resupply on a couple of things, and by the way, the locals acted you'd think Satan himself had just walked through the door. Everyone stared. At least 3 people followed me around. I was dressed in black and do have a thick beard and visible tattoos, which adds up to looking like trouble in some people's books, but didn't do anything wrong and wasn't wearing something with anything objectionable or offensive on it. It was totally uncalled for. Just say hello. I'm really nice, I promise. Big teddy bear. That's my whole thing. Anna, Illinois would count for me. It has a reputation of being a sundown town even now. Most people forget about Southern Illinois, and it shows. Hell, most of Southern Illinois is like that. Nothing to do but do drugs, F and go hiking. Not necessarily in that order. The colleges are dying, and with the places like Carbondale, the closest thing to civilization outside of the St. Louis burbs, there's no jobs worth much. So anyone who wants to go somewhere in life would move elsewhere quick. Covington, Virginia. I used to drive a lot for work a few years ago, and about twice a week I would find myself in Covington. The first thing you notice is the smell. It was like drinking hot dog water, but you were breathing it in. That was caused by the pollutants from the paper factory there. About 20% of the people who live there work for said factory, and factory work is not all rainbows and butterflies, so it makes sense that the people there wouldn't be too happy in the first place. All that aside, I drove my GPS for the most part, and before I even noticed the smell, as I was coming into town, I just felt off. Like someone was watching me or following me, but of course, no one was. I don't believe in the supernatural, but that place freaked me out so much. I'm talking Evil Dead 2013 type of feeling. Thankfully, I'm no longer in that line of work now, and I will never step foot in that town again. Napoli, Ontario. I was only there for 3 to 4 months. My aunt passed away and was a hoarder, so I helped my parents sort stuff and get rid of it. This town was creepy, mainly at night, but it seemed that basically everyone there was on welfare. You got extremely racist vibes from everyone. I have lived in a lot of places, but this place made my skin crawl, and it wasn't the house that did that. I wouldn't step foot in that town ever again if you paid me. I'm surprised no one has said Pulaski, Tennessee. I was visiting a friend who goes to college there, and while I was hanging out with them and some of their friends, they'd all tell me not to go out after night for any reason. They were all really hesitant to explain why after a while, though. They tell me it's because the KKK still patrol the streets in that town. It turns out that's where the KKK was founded, and they still have a strong presence around town. While traveling through West Texas about 40 years ago with my parents, we stopped at a roadside diner. Not really in a town, just a little place off the side of I-40. There were no other cars in the parking lot, but we went in anyway, mostly to use the restroom. My dad was hungry, so we stayed to eat. Sat down in a booth across the aisle from this skeevy-looking redneck. He stands up and walks to our table, bends down, and looks 15 years old me directly in the face and says, "Bet you never expected to be no place like this." Walked out the door. We did not stay to eat, just got back in the station wagon and got the hell out of Dodge. During a training in Boulder, I, a mixed-race Dutch guy, visited a restaurant with my Latino coworker, a British instructor, and one local guy. We went cruising through the Rocky Mountains and ended up in Nederland, named after the original settlers. It was a Friday night. The place was packed with families, music was playing, people were having a good time. We came through the door and everyone stopped talking and stared at us. I swear the music stopped as well. Our local friend was the last one to get in, and he just yelled a jolly, "Howdy, folks." The music started playing again, and people continued their talking. Felt like a scene from Blazing Saddles. My husband and I once stopped into a Wimpys diner in Peterborough, Ontario, and it was the strangest experience we ever had. It was clearly a family running the place with the dad in the kitchen and his 12-year-old daughter serving tables. There was another younger boy, probably like 10 years old, sitting at the counter wearing a bunch of colorful plastic jewelry all over him. Big clip-on earrings, bracelets all up his arms, and more necklaces than Mr. T. He was so skinny and kind of creepy looking, and just kept staring at us the whole time. The whole place was so dark and dingy, and the atmosphere was as tense as if Elvis played eerily in the background. The father was a mean-looking man, and just kept barking orders at his kids while flipping our burgers in the open kitchen. We couldn't understand why he was so frantic, acting like it was super busy when we were the only ones in there. He was also clearly embarrassed by his effeminate son, who kept begging for more coins to put in the gumball-type machine, which was clearly where he was getting all the jewelry. The daughter seemed terrified of us, as she barely spoke above a whisper when she took our order. It was like Bob's Burgers from hell. We eventually paid and left, but I can say the memory of that diner never left us. It's been about 8 years, and we still talk about that place. I really hope those kids are alright. Not a town, but a place. The Saddle, atop between two peaks at Mount Barney. It took a day to climb. We weren't that fit, and the landscape is all eucalyptus bush. The path is clear, but fades eventually as you get higher before kind of turning into a path of least resistance near the top. As you reach the Saddle, open ellipticus gives you to moist land closer to rainforest. It's a stark difference, not only in the trees around you, but in the air as well. The bush usually smells dry and warm, whereas the rainforest is always damp and humid. I've been in many different parts of the bush where I've felt calm and welcome, and others where I felt unsafe and wouldn't want to be there at night. I've even been in places that felt hostile for no obvious reason. This place felt like nothing else. For a start, we couldn't get a fire going. There was a fire ban, so we had to use a gas stove instead of a campfire. Even then, we struggled to get the fire to light or stay lit. It was basically just enough to boil water and cook a tiny amount of food, and it never felt hot. Besides that though, the place felt occupied. I felt like it knew we were there and were curious about us. I didn't feel unwelcome. I didn't feel like I was being watched, but it didn't feel like the empty bush. When I woke up in the morning, we tried to climb the pathless peak to see the sunrise, but we only saw fog. I found my bag had been opened and my stuff had been thrown around, apparently by the possums. I lost my torch on the climb to the peak again, following no path but my own. Somehow, on the way back down, a man came from behind and passed us and gave me my torch back. I have no idea where he came from or how he found my torch amongst all the grass, rocks, and bushes. There's a logical explanation for it all, of course. The rainforest feels very different to the bush. The guy probably climbed the other face, starting early in the morning. Possums are known to have an F around when they feel like it, but it certainly felt like something lived there and was very curious about us. The Turkish-occupied part of Nicosia in Cyprus. There's something very uncomfortable about it. We felt so out of place, and it was very eerie. That side is drastically different to the unoccupied side. The Turkish side is uncared for, silent, and empty. We didn't stay long before going back to the Cypriot side. Lincoln, New Mexico. A town with a violent history as the epicenter of the Lincoln County War with Billy the Kid. It's basically a ghost town museum. It's amazing to visit since the whole town is a self-guided museum. You can stand where Ollinger was shot where Billy the Kid shot him. You can touch the bullet holes that Billy the Kid put there. You can feel the energy there. You can visit the graves, Billy the Kid's graves in Fort Sumner. Incredible place. Blytheville, Arkansas, most evil-feeling town ever. The military base moved out in the 80s, so it is a complete ghost town. Never in my life have I felt like someone was following me all the time. There was just a darkness you can't explain. It was like every day was cloudy. I never left my house. I only stayed 4 months. I couldn't stand it anymore. Come to find out, it had a horrific history. A lot of the wood to rebuild Chicago after the fire was taken from Blytheville, Arkansas, and there was a lot of drinking, a lot of unsavviness, and a great deal of murders. I grew up in historic DC and Virginia, so you have this death was just thick in this place. Peach Springs, Arizona. Stayed overnight from an early morning rafting trip. Decided I'd walk the town a bit to see where I was at. Cop stopped me less than 100 feet away from the hotel front doors, warning me to turn back and to stay inside. Stupidly, I asked why out of sheer surprise. His response, "I'm the only cop in town and can't be everywhere at once. I can't force you to go back, but promise, we'll be seeing each other again if you keep heading in that direction you're going." Enough said was my thought. Tucumcari, New Mexico. I did it. I have never been to a place that time, so obviously forgot. Somewhere around 1990. This place is so effing uncomfortable just to drive through, and my friend and I stopped to eat. I think it was called the Lizard Lounge or something like that. The restaurant was in a maybe abandoned hotel and gave serious wrong turn vibes. The food and service were fine, but the ambiance was so uncomfortable. They had lifelike portraits of people painted like they were sitting in the booths, eating with you. Oof. Happy Valley, New York. It's an abandoned ghost town that now is a state park. Rumor has it the town was killed off in an outbreak of the bubonic plague, but the details are sketchy at best. Every time you pass by the entrance to the state park where you could look down the former main street that existed in the 19th century, you'd always get a chill up your spine. Sanderson, Florida. One blinking stoplight town. Basically one small four-way intersection with a couple of gas stations where townsfolk hang out at, and a big church that's lit up at night right off the I-10 exit. Needed gas as I was heading back down to South Florida and went into town to fill up. I'm sure the people are fine and all, but the drive in past the previously mentioned landmarks made it feel like the opening to every legit terrifying horror movie you can think of. I was with my dad, and once we got back to I-10, we both said it was the eeriest place we could remember being. Granted, it was late at night, which always adds to it. Nobody unwelcoming or anything, just a creepy sort of vibe of a time warp feeling where it felt like you'd gone back into past 50 to 60 years. That was about 12 years ago, and I passed the exit for that town quite a few times in travels throughout the years, and I will continue to pass it by indefinitely. Most of rural Pennsylvania. I'm not sure what it is about this state, but once you veer off the main road, things get weird fast. I've driven across rural New York, Maryland, and Ohio, and they're all normal. Pennsylvania is another story. I think what does it to me is that rural PA is more likely to have a gloomy, overcast sky. Also, the rural places are developed, but they give off this vibe like you're visiting somewhere no one else has visited for decades. Places untouched by time. There are all these signs of brands that don't exist, or that exist, but the sign has to be like 60 years old. Like plenty of vintage ads. Also, there are these weird twisted trees up there. I want to add that I have nothing against PA. I like the state and its many tourist attractions. It is just something that I noticed and that struck me as weird and unexpected. Another thing that might make everything weird is that PA went all in with fracking, so it isn't unexpected to see communities that look half abandoned and destroyed.